I think it's unfair to do it twice. Okay, just having a bit of a connection delay. Okay, hello and welcome to everyone online. Today's second session of the Outperformers Educate series, and today we've got the wonderful Emma Beard from Line here to share with us some significant insights and her great story around achieving flexibility and smart decision making when it comes to achieving flexibility in your career. Just for some context to everyone online, and I've just shared this with everyone in the room, we have a room of 30 great individuals here joining us in Sydney. For everyone online, you're very welcome to ask questions on our question poll there. I will try to service and address every one of them. If we get a bit excited and there's too many, I will field them to Emma later on, and hopefully we'll get everyone some sort of response. But broadly today, just as a quick introduction, there are some new members to the Outperformer listening online. Thank you very much for joining us. This is a really valuable thing for myself and all of our team to be doing for you, and ultimately just to provide some context. This, and I mentioned this to the room before, as opposed to digesting for your CPD hours some tax updates and accounting standard updates and different things of a technical nature which are really important to your career. This is really about tapping into the voice and the journey of talented leaders and executives and subject matter experts to help you generate ideas, provoke thought, and look at ways you can take things that those that are walking the talk are doing back to your organisation and back to your own career. So I've done enough of the talking. I'd like to introduce and welcome Emma Beard. Thanks for coming, Emma.
That's okay. Good to be here.
Thank you. That's the first time you've had a chance to talk. So, Emma, I'm going to throw the ball to you. Just for context, Emma's had many years with Line, and in the last 8 of those years has worked in either a part-time or flexible full-time arrangement as a C-suite executive, and as someone that has moved around the business and achieved some really good results. More recently has just moved into the Enterprise Services Director role with Line, which is a fairly significant and big meaty task to take on after some change in the business. And I won't tell your entire story, but I think has the beauty of providing a lot of context on how to execute on flexible arrangement and still achieve some really good career results, and what is a great result for yourself in your career. So Emma, I'd love you to just briefly introduce yourself, share a bit of your story, and just broach that topic of flexibility and what we're going to cover today.
Okay, sounds good. So hello everyone. I think for me, a lot of what I'll talk about more in how I've achieved in my career is what I would do whether I was working flexibly or not. So I think there are some foundational elements that are true just in terms of how you are clear on your priorities, your strengths, what you want to achieve, and that's important regardless of what type of work pattern you're in. I think what you'll see coming through is over my many years post uni, I've explored a number of different businesses, a number of different roles. So we'll talk about how that links into some of my, I've got 3 key pieces of career advice, so it ties into that. So I might jump straight into there.
Yeah, I'd love that too. Yeah, if you can, talk about, and I'd love that general overview of, what is your perspective on driving your career, and particularly with the mindset of flexibility that you've achieved in the last 8 years.
Lovely. So people do come to me a fair bit in Line to ask me for career advice at different points in time, and there's probably 3 different areas I typically go to. And the first one is always asking, well, are you enjoying what you're doing now? And I think that's a really important question, because if you actually are enjoying what you're doing now, I've always found for me that translates into results because you're engaged. We know that engaged people drive great outcomes. So my first question is, are you enjoying what you're doing now? And if the person is like, no, not really, I'm like, well, can you reframe it? What would it take for you to enjoy what you're doing now? And so you might think about, can you reshape the goals you're working on? Can you flip some things around so that you're in your role that you're in and you're really enjoying what you're doing, and that again will drive outcomes. And if the person who I'm talking to says, no, I'm just not engaged, not liking it, can't see that, then I'm like, well, you've got to change it. Now, sometimes that's a brave move and a courageous move because change is hard, but that's my first overarching career advice. And so I've never had a career plan. And that's worked for me. I know some people do like having a career plan, and that works for them. So it's a bit of I'm very much about the individual, but I've always come back to, I've always really enjoyed what I'm doing. There have been times when I've had days and weeks and at times months where I haven't really enjoyed certain roles or times as much as others, but I do get into a thing of reframing or rethinking or reorganising what my priorities are. So I'm back into that way of working where I'm really enjoying what I'm doing.
Fantastic.
So that's like my first key approach. The second piece of career advice I give people is just keep an open mind to what you do. So again, which is probably why I don't like a career plan. So if I think about me, when I finished uni, I didn't go down the Big Four pathway because financial accounting and that space didn't really engage me. I went straight into working for manufacturing and management accounting, which is what I really enjoyed. And then I could have worked for that company in London, but I didn't take that role, which would have been very easy to. I worked for an IT company and I had no idea about IT. But so I'd see things for servers and I'd go, well, what's a server? And they'd laugh at me. I'm like, well, just show me what a server is. And I still don't know what a server is. I kind of do. But so I think taking some risks in your career along the way, particularly in the early days, is really important. And so going from a manufacturing, management, accounting background to an IT global business partner to then Lion, and then I've been with Lion for about 17 years now. And I've had I've kind of zigzagged around a number of different roles. So started in a group role, moved out into the business, moved through a number of different roles in the business. Over that time, I've taken what would on paper be a backward step. So I went from reporting to the finance director to being a direct report of the finance director, but I did that to get experience I was missing. And then that enabled me to move on to future roles. So I think it's keeping an open mind, not getting too caught up on who you're reporting into, but thinking more around, are you getting a breadth of experiences? Are you getting, along the way, are you learning new things that are actually going to pay dividends down the track? So I've moved around corporate to BU, back into group or corporate function roles. Done risk assurance. At the time when I moved into our risk assurance director role, a number of people, and I was in the business unit then in a commercial role, a number of people were like, why on earth are you doing that? That's really dry. I'm like, actually, it depends how you look at it. It's really interesting. If you think about it more broadly, you get overview of the business, you get this, and that person ended up working for the risk assurance team after that. So I think it's keeping an open mind.
Yeah. Just a quick one on that, tough question, but have you ever taken the unsexy role that you genuinely thought wasn't sexy until you got into it?
No, but I think I am. Look, I'm naturally probably veer on the more positive possibility side of the spectrum.
Very good. Yep.
So I think I can get into almost any scenario or situation and see something of interest.
See the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
So it's a nice segue into my third piece of advice, and it's know your strengths. So I don't know if there's a lot of strengths analysis tools out there. For me, there's a tool called the VIA Strengths tool. It's free, it's online, you get a little report telling you what your strengths are. It doesn't talk about your weaknesses, but it talks about your strengths. My strengths have changed over the years, and that's okay as well, but my top strengths are always up there, and one of them is curiosity and a love of learning, and it probably plays out in some of the things I've just talked about then, but I think me being really aware of what's engaging for me, what do I really enjoy doing. And again, if I'm learning something new, I'm pretty happy. So that's why when I've been in a scenario and people have talked to me about a role and I've gone, oh, I don't know, it's probably not what I thought I'd be doing right now. I've gone, actually, I'm going to come out of that. I'm going to learn X, Y, Z. So that's pretty cool. And then I've been pretty quick to hop on board.
You'd be easy to manage then.
Well, there's a flip side. But yes, I think for me it's really important to know what your strengths are. And the other reason why is that there are times when, again, if you're not feeling happy or engaged, or times are tough, or you're in a difficult change scenario, really relying on your strengths or drawing on your strengths to get you through that is a really powerful way to help navigate those times that are a bit tricky, and we all have them. So I quite often come back to strengths. So again, if I'm talking to people and they're really wanting to think about how do they shape their career, how do they think what the next move is, I'll quite often come back to, well, what do you enjoy doing? What are your strengths? Do you know what they are? And that's a really good starting point.
Very good. And I think it's, that point about curiosity is an interesting one because it segues into this next question that I'm going to ask you. And if you consider, and I think most people in the audience in the room would appreciate this, achieving flexibility takes two people. You've got an environment and a whole lot of stakeholders we need to drive, and then ourselves, and looking at the way we behave within that environment.
Yeah.
So just to start on the first point around manufacturing flexibility, you've done that quite well in your career. And maybe you can dig into a few stories around this, but how have you managed to manufacture that in your own career?
So I think to start off with, there's a lot about being clear on what's important to you at that point in time. So obviously for a lot of people, when you have children, and I would say whether you're a woman or a man, when you have a family for the first time, flexibility is important. Because there's a lot of dads out there who want to be more present for their kids. So, I think one of the biggest things we need to do in this space, we need to stop making it gender focused. We need to make it broader than that. So I think being real clear on what it is. So at the time when I first had my first child, I was the commercial manager for our supply chain team then. And the way of thinking in the business back then was, well, people go on maternity leave, particularly the first timers, and then they come back 3 days a week because they pretty generally follow up with a second one pretty quick after that, and that's a good way to keep everyone in a holding pattern. And so that was the businesses going in assumption of, oh, well, we'll just recruit into your role permanently. And it's good. I was talking to a family friend who, and she just said to me, "Do you enjoy what you do now?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do really enjoy my role now." She went, "Well, why couldn't you do it part-time?" I went, "That's a really good question." So I went back to my business partner and I said, "I can do this role 3 days a week. When I come back, there'll be a saving on my salary, so 2/5 of my salary can pay for a commercial analyst. So we supplement the team with an analyst. I'll work on the strategic important stuff. They'll take the overflow." I think, and I think when you can put a business case there, you need to put the solution on the table. So you need to be able to articulate why a particular idea is a good idea, how it will work, and a solution. So if I just had gone and said, "I want to do this 3 days a week," probably might have ended, that conversation might have ended pretty quickly. They're going, "Look, I've thought about it. This is how I think it could work. This is what we would do." I had a supportive leader and got the business partner across it. So that worked out really well. Having said that, while I was on maternity leave, which happens quite a bit, there was an org structure that completely changed how those teams were working. And that's when I came back into a role that was not what I thought, but it was a role in an area that I hadn't worked in before. So. But the other important story then, so I came back on board as commercial manager for sales strategy, and that was when I took a step back, so from reporting into the finance director into our commercial director in sales, but I hadn't done sales strategy. So at the time, the feedback to me was, "Look, you're missing this. You've got supply chain, you've got planning, you've got X, Y, Z. Really good to get your exposure here." I went, "Okay, yep, see that." And then we're just about to kick off this major program of work, and I was also business partnering our independent sales team as well. And I looked at what was before me in terms of deliverables. You've got to think, what would I need to achieve or deliver to be successful in this role? What would that look like? So I mapped that out, and I went to my boss, and again, it's a bit of a courageous decision, where I said, look, I don't think I could do this job 5 days a week, let alone 3 days a week, because you're asking me to business partner 4 salespeople, and they're going through these priorities, these are their challenges, this is what they need to be able to deliver it in terms of commercial support. And you want commercial leadership on this project. This is a person and a half role, and I'm half a person effectively with the 3 days a week that I've got. So we developed a solution where we got a junior commercial manager on board reporting through to me, and we worked out how, again, they took on the overflow. So it was a call. So it was a decision to the business of, do you really want to resource this project and get this project done in this way? And if you don't, that's okay. But I can't do this and this. So that was a hard conversation for me to have personally, because I pride myself on delivering great results and being, one of those people that is like, yep, I can do it, I know how to do it, this is what we're going to do. So to go back and go, I can't do that. But again, it was clearly mapped out around, well, this is what we would need to deliver to make it work. And this is the type of resourcing you need to make it work. And if you just want to keep me, I can make it work, but I'm going to have to cut out X, Y, Z.
So a slight segue, and we're going to go into the other side of the coin here in terms of the environment. But I'm sure this question's on people's mind in the room. Some people might want that, but is there a reason why that you were afforded that opportunity, you had that relationship with the leader to be able to have that conversation?
I think. So by then I'd been in Lion about 6 or 7 years, so I had a good track record behind me. So it would have been a hard conversation to have without having been in Lion for, I had a bit of history and credibility behind me.
Yeah.
I had trust that around how I work and what I do. So yeah,
very good. Because I think that's important to acknowledge. I do think your ability to convey those messages will be there's a reflectiveness around your credibility, and that can happen quickly. It can certainly, I believe it can. I'm sure you've seen examples in Lion that have. But the next piece is just talking about. So that's on one hand your ability to have a solution, define that, and design a solution around flexibility and what that looks like for you. And use a couple of good case studies or examples there. What does the environment need to look like, and how have you worked or communicated with the environment, and what has Lion felt like for you in terms of developing that?
So there's a reason why I've been with Lion for 17 years, and it really is a great company to work for. And look, I'm really passionate about Lion, and we do have a really great culture, and for across a whole different spectrum of areas. But one of the things that Lion has done really well over a long period of time is support flexibility and really being focused on achievements or the outcomes, not how you're in the, not the how, but it's really, the how in terms of behaviours, but being really clear on what the achievements or deliverables are. So not being seen to be in the office 5 days a week or, between these certain hours. So if you can do your job in 6 hours a day and you're delivering whatever you need to, fantastic. You don't need to be there as long as you're delivering things. So, or delivering what your commitments are. And we have had that culture in play for a while. It has continued to evolve over time, and we've just in the last year relaunched our flex policy, made it a little bit more broader in what that looks like as well. So we've continued to think about how can we support flexible work patterns in Lion, and what would that look like for people. So we've got a company culture that supports it, so that does make it easy. But it's really important to recognise it is a two-way conversation. So it's for the person who's looking to work flexibly, and it's going to look different for different people. They've got to come with the plan and the proposal and the idea, and it's up to the business or the leader to see how it can make
And is that's
work.
levered primarily on the achievement?
Yeah.
So if you focus on that,
Yep.
you can show how you're going to deliver.
Yeah.
And the outcome's achievable
That's
in their
right.
mind as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so flex working in Lion can look like I had one guy working for me last year, and one of the things that was really important for him, and he lived about an hour away in terms of commute time, was that one day a week he could work from home. What that enabled him to do was he gained 2 hours back in his day to get different things done, and he timed that day with when he could coach his son's soccer team, so he got to be there a bit more for his family. But this guy continued to absolutely deliver what he needed to deliver. So, so that was fantastic. But again, he was really clear with me, with his business partner, what that would look like. And obviously, on those days, if his business partner needed him or I needed him, there's the phone, there's the email. So we're also lucky that in today's environment, we've got great technology that makes this happen as well.
Yeah, and that's the next point. So what are some of the other things that you leverage? I would imagine your environment has a way of working, and some of those features, for example, might be around what is right to achieve flexibility and what doesn't work, and technology you mentioned there as well. Could you share a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so technology, I think, has been a real enabler in this space. So for me at the moment, I work, my contract is for 5 days a week, but 1 day a week I work from home, and I'm pretty strict on that. Having said that, tomorrow we've got a team day. So there are days when there's got to be give and take.
Absolutely.
And it's never, but people can call me when I'm working from home. I try and use that time for thinking time. I try and use that time for more meaty pieces of work, so try to avoid having meetings if at all possible on that day. That's my day to get bigger stuff done, and that's important for me. Also means I can take my kids to school and pick them up from school as well. Yep. But then my team also know that if they need me on that day, I'm there. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of work around it. The other thing we do, so I've got 5 direct reports at the moment, and 3 out of the 5 work flexibly. I know I'm generally on the road by about 7 a.m. in the morning, and I know who in my team is also driving to work at that point in time, and we will use that time to talk to each other on the phone. Mm-hmm. And that means that when we're in the office, we're using our office time to get other stuff done. Yeah. So, and similarly, when I'm driving home, I typically know who can I call right now, so you get a good understanding of different people's work patterns, whether they're in your team or whether they're stakeholders, and when is a good time to contact them out of those times when you're physically there in the office.
So if someone was in a third-party environment, maybe not Line, and you were walking into a situation when you believe there's the ability to achieve flexibility, how do you tap into that work pattern and efficiently, particularly when you're taking on a new role, and I imagine now you're probably doing this again, to manage those expectations and understand, well, how do I get the best out of my team, and how do they get the best out of me?
So what I do personally with my team, if they're wanting to work flex, I ask them to design how that's going to work, because it's no point me doing it because I don't know what's important to them, or what they want to do. So I get them to really think through the solution, and then I think I'm really clear with my team around, look, call me anytime after 6 a.m. up to 8 p.m. if you need to talk. That's what mobile phones are for. Also, if it's after work hours, because quite often after dinner I'll be online, and people might see my little link light is on, which means that I'm online, and again, people know that's a good time to instant message me if they just want to check in on something quickly. So and they know that's okay. It's just variable depending on role, team. Some of it's organic, but what I'm doing with my team, new team that I'm getting to know, I'll ask them, can I do this? Is this okay if I do this now? So is it okay if I call you at 7 a.m. in the morning? Yeah.
There's some rules of engagement, aren't there? Yeah. Yes,
it's having that open dialogue. It's doing that. What works for you? This is what works for me. How can we find that?
Yeah. And I know culturally at Line, one of the things that you've implemented, we were talking about it earlier, is this concept of not booking meetings at 8 o'clock or after 5. Why has that come about, and can you tell a bit of the story and the background to that?
So like a lot of organisations, one of the things that we seem to suffer from in Lion is a surplus of meetings, which is frustrating for everyone. No one goes, hey, got a meeting. So we all recognise that too much time was being taken up in meetings, which meant the overflow of actually getting stuff done that you needed to get done was increasingly happening out of hours. So there was recognition of that to start off with, from very senior levels across Lion to more broadly. So we kind of reshaped as an organisation, actually, do you really need to have a meeting? How do you make them more efficient? And I know all organisations look at that every now and again. But we've really, as an organisation, tried to whittle back down on meetings. At the same time, we'd got into a pattern where meetings would regularly be set up at 8 a.m. or start at 5 p.m, which again, if you've got school-aged children, even if you've got a partner who can work flex or whatever, it's really hard, because it means, you know, if you want to take your child to school or pick up your child or be there before they flake at night, that pattern isn't helpful. And you overlay 8 a.m, those hours early in the morning is generally when people are most productive as well, because you've got a clear head, you can set your strategy for the day, you can be really clear on your priorities. So there was a bit of a moment of realisation for a number of people that the way we were working wasn't effective. And so what we call our group leadership team, which is the CEO and his direct reports, went, you know what, as an organisation, we need to adopt an approach where we don't have meetings before 9 a.m. And we're doing that for a whole host of reasons. One, because that's really productive time for our people. But two, for people who are working flexibly, and we've got a lot of people who work flexibly, that's not... So we've got this great flex policy, and then we're doing something which is totally counterintuitive. So we now have these an approach where no meetings before 9 or no meetings after 4, because some meetings can go for an hour. Now that... and there's a whole lot of us said, yay, for a whole host of reasons. And it also means you've got less hours in a day to schedule meetings. So it makes you make clearer decisions around, well, actually, do we really need to do this via a meeting? Can't we just have a quick email conversation or a quick phone call and do it that way instead? So that's been really good. There are exceptions to the rule. So every now and again, someone will go, we need to meet on this, we need to make a decision on this, and the only time we've all got is 8:30, are you okay? Some people might dial in. So that's been really good in Lion. That's probably been underway for about a year and was driven by, one, a recognition that we're just not using our time productively, it's not working for a lot of people, and it's not being true to our flex policy either.
Yeah, and I think it helps when you've got a culture that's aligned to achievement. Once you are aware of what the goal is, it's much easier to start designing an environment around that goal.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, I think where a lot of businesses do go wrong is there's a lot of FaceTime and things like that that get held up as important, where they don't actually there's no directional connection between that and the goal. It's actually a good question that's come in online, and it sort of relates to that, which I might ask before the next one. It's great to hear that Lion supports flexibility, and so do you as an individual. Is there still a perception or a stigma with some business stakeholders that if you're not visible, you're not there? And how would you address that if there is that, a feeling of that through any other stakeholders?
Yeah, there is. I'd say it's quite, well, I call it dinosaur thinking. It won't last for much longer because it's not how people work. And so, or it's not what people want. So you think about, for us as Lion or any organisation, you've got great people. We know working flexibly is important to people for a whole host of reasons. It doesn't have to be child driven. It can be, some people volunteer outside of work. So it might be having time to fit in their passions outside of work. So there is a lot of research that articulates and can quantify that working flexibly is really important in either retaining great people or attracting great people. So you kind of go, there's a reason why a lot of companies are doing this, and there's a reason why a lot of people really like working this way. But yeah, look, I hear it every now and again in Lion, and I think it's really dependent upon everyone who feels passionate about this, and I do, is to call people on it and go, and I'll go, look, it's a bit been a bit of a dinosaur there, or I must have been a bit 1950s in the thinking there. So it doesn't have to be confrontational, but you've got to call it out for what it is. And I know I had a conversation with one leader about a year ago who's one of his team members wanted to work flexibly, and he was concerned. She wanted to work from home one day a week, and he's like, well, I don't know what she'll be working on. I was like, does it matter? Have you agreed with her what you want her to deliver each week or each day? Yes, I have. Well, does it matter? Is she delivering it? And I said, if you're confident this person can deliver it, doesn't matter if you see them or not, because if they're delivering what they're committed to. The other thing I said is, and either way, whether they were working flexibly or working here, if they weren't delivering, that's a performance or an achievement conversation, because they're not delivering. So you can't, and this is where I do see it muddy the waters a bit. Sometimes people are reluctant to embrace working flexibly because they're not confident people are going to deliver. That's not a flex issue, that's a performance issue. And it needs to be addressed as a performance issue. And if you're shying away from having that conversation, you're actually missing an opportunity for that person as well as the business. And as we all know, when people aren't achieving in their role, there could be a whole host of reasons why. It could be capability, it could be workload, it could be, there's all of these things you need to investigate. So discounting that because you're not sure what that person's working on is silly, in my opinion. But
anyone who disagrees, you're silly.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good, piece of feedback for people if there is a sense of fear, or have that conversation with anyone that disagrees with that mindset, and have some robust debate, because if you do want to achieve flexibility, you're not going to get it simply by waiting for it to happen. If someone has that mindset already, you really need to push the conversation, push the envelope, and particularly if your culture's not the same as line.
So actually, another good example of one thing we did when we relaunched our flex policy is we found individuals who were working flexibly, and we celebrated them. So we had little posters up all around the office on the back of toilet doors, because that gets a lot of reading time. And then, but we celebrated a whole host of people who were working flexibly for a whole host of different reasons. And it could have been someone who took time off 3 months off as extended leave to do something on their bucket list, to someone who worked from home so they could volunteer to. So it wasn't, again, it was moving away from working flexibly. It relates to women who have children. And that is an element, but it's not the whole element. So, and I know for me, if I'm leaving early to pick up my kids from sport, I will sing it out loud and proud and walk out of the office and I actually go out of my way to go, bye. And, but that's okay. And if people go, oh, she's leaving at 4 o'clock, fine. They can have that opinion, but I know if I'm delivering and my leader feels like I'm delivering and I'm achieving what I need to achieve and I'm leaving at 4, that's bloody fantastic. So I think you need to flip it around the other way.
You'd be outperforming.
Exactly.
Moving on to a slightly different topic. So we've got a lot of people that I work with that do struggle to find flexibility, and sometimes that's in the transition phase from company to company. Sometimes it's within their own organisation. But why do you think it's hard for people to find it in other environments or in their own career, in your opinion?
I think initially it comes back to you kind of have to recognise or reflect that you can't do what you would traditionally do in 5 days a week in a more flexible format sometimes. If you're doing reduced hours or reduced days. You've got to have the conversation which is saying, I'm not going to deliver certain things, and that doesn't feel good for a lot of people. But you're not. It's not that you're delivering less. You're choosing where you're spending your time. But you've got to think about what happens to that overflow. So or sometimes you go, actually, I used to attend this meeting. I don't need to do it. Or I can send someone in my team and it's going to be a great development opportunity. So it's trying to think through how do you slice it. But the hard thing is, as an individual, and it's hard for me early on, like a couple of those conversations that I had when I first came back from maternity leave and I was working 3 days a week, to say I can't do this, or I'm not going to go to this conference, or I'm not going to attend this session, doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel good. And we know for a lot of people saying no generally isn't easy. But then I think it's coming back to, well, why am I saying no? Am I just saying no, or am I being clear on my priorities? Have I got, and I come back to, it's really important to align with your leader and with your business partner or your stakeholders what you are working on. And being really open and honest. So over the years, I've just found being really open, honest, transparent has worked really well.
Mm-hmm.
So...
has that meant tough conversations that felt
yeah, it feels funny. Yeah, totally. And like I know one of the roles, a few roles ago when I was the commercial director for our beer sales business, and I was coming in behind someone who could just reel facts and figures off the top of his head, and he'd been really good at it for a number of years, and I was coming in there. I don't work that way. If I haven't written something down, I generally don't remember it. And so I'm not one to pull facts and figures off that. And I said that to my business partner, who was the sales director. I was like, look, if you want another person who is like this, and he goes, yeah, we call him the walking calculator. And I'm like, excellent. I'm not your girl, because that's not me. That's not a strength of mine. And so that feels hard to go, if you want that, don't pick me. Don't get me on board. But having that conversation up front meant you've managed that expectation, but you don't want to go into a role or a situation. If that's what the sales director for beer really wanted, then me going into that role would have been a disaster, because you would have had total misalignment. Now, was that easy to say that at the time? I'm like, oh my God, I've aspired to this role for the last 5 years. I'm getting there, and now I'm saying, don't pick me. But it was more in the context of getting alignment on expectations. So, and I think, again, it does tie back into flex working or part-time working, but just generally too.
Well, it ties into any career design. I think if you're going into an environment, we talk about performance, trying to create, performance is subjective. It's all about the eyes of the stakeholders that you deal with and what they see as valuable. And if it's the human calculator, then fantastic. If you're not that, you're probably not going to be a performer, and that will be career limiting.
Yeah. Actually, he called him the human mainframe, which is even so.
Even more intensive.
So now at the time, his response was, look, you've got a different set of strengths and to what that person has. So I definitely want you on board. So come on board. Mm-hmm. But it meant really up front, we were clear on, well, what space do I play in that's going to be really interesting and engaging for my business partner. Now, that numbers part is also really important. So for me, it's like, okay, as I'm resourcing my team, I need to make sure I'm resourcing it with this skill set over here. So
covering your weaknesses.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Very good. Now, I'm just going to ask a few more questions. Please, guys, if you've got any things that you'd like to, just prepare that, because I'm about to throw the ball to you. But we talk about culture before, and if we're looking about trying to create a culture of flexibility, so let's reflect back to your early days in line, or let's consider maybe a blank sheet of paper if you were able to take it in another organisation. What are some of the things you would do to create a culture of flexibility?
I think what I find generally works well with people is outlining the benefits. So there's a whole lot of data out there online now, and case studies on why flex working, what the benefits of that is, and how that relates to people engagement, how it relates to attracting and retaining great people. So you can get that. So I always start with trying to back up a new idea or with some external research goes a long way. You've also got other professional organisations out there, like the Corporate Executive Board, we use them a lot at Lion, who have a lot of case studies and a lot of research, and a lot of their research is based up over a number of companies globally. So you're coming with, yes, this means we have to change as a team or as an organisation, but the benefits are this. So
And they're real.
yeah, and they're real. So so there's first of all building the business case or the driver for change, recognising that there is a change impact. So what would that actually mean? You can also do, well, what's the worst that could happen here, and put that out there. The other thing is to maybe say, okay, well, let's give it a 3-month trial. Let's see what happens in 3 months. So.
And do you think in terms of objectives as well, aligning those benefits to the objectives the business has is important as well? Because I typically find when we're trying to message such a change, if you can't get into the headspace of the leadership group or the C-suite and you don't really realise what their pain points are, it's very hard to message those sorts of wholesale or significant changes. There's already a lot of pressure on most of our businesses. There's already a lot of companies are running pretty thin at the moment. Would you agree that that's something that you would adopt?
Absolutely. Yeah, so it might be, depending on the strategic priorities or the immediate business priorities, linking it back into there where you can.
Yep.
I think also being really clear on what are you asking your organisation or your team or your leader for. So I'm asking you to support this and champion it. And then there's a little bit, well, what's in it for that person? So if it's your leader and it's kind of new ground, well, do you want to be known as a change agent and someone who's really championing future ways of working? So there's a bit about painting what the aspiration or the opportunity is for that person as well.
Very good. So what about, let's get a little bit, let's put our dinosaur hat on, but I still want to ask this question. What can go wrong in a part-time setup, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think generally when I see things not working, it's when there hasn't been that alignment of expectations up front and having those honest conversations up front. Because if you've got an area of the business or a stakeholder who's expecting something that arrangement isn't going to work, or be able to deliver, it's not going to work.
Yep.
So the other thing, when I've seen it not work too, it's when the individual who wants to work flexibly isn't being flexible themselves around how they achieve it. So there's got to be multiple pathways to make that work. And a great example is a couple of roles back, I had someone who I wanted to recruit into the planning manager role, so responsible for doing month end, the management reporting and all of that, and she worked 3.5 days a week, and that was really important to her. And the person who was in that role said, this role cannot be done part-time. I'm working 5 days a week and I'm working 12-hour days. This role cannot be done part-time. So I have an opinion that any role can be done part-time or flexibly. And you've got to go in with that mindset. So we worked, but this person was flexible in return. So if working day 2 or working day 3, where you had to make some key decisions around accruals or what you do, fell on one of those days when she was her days when she wasn't her non-work days, she would call into those to our meetings to do that. Now that was half an hour of her time, and she'd balance it out on the other days. So, or if there was something urgent, I knew if there was something urgent, she would have it set up so that either herself or someone in her team were ready to support me in the business to get the outcome we needed. Yeah. But it takes planning, so you've got to plan up front, and you've got to be clear on how you can make it work. But there was flex on both sides there.
Yeah, good. Can I just go to the audience now here in the room, and obviously online, please feel free. I'll just spend a couple of questions coming, but any questions for Emma just while we're in this stage? I think we've brought up some really interesting topics, but I'd love to get some thought from the audience. Yes.
Hi Emma, thanks for that. Michelle O'Connor is my name, from the University of New South Wales, but only week 3 in that role, and I was in a global mining company, so we worked flexibly because of location and travel and all of that. But just interested in your opinion, so you said that flexibility is not a gender issue, and I agree because it's a leadership issue, but predominantly senior leadership roles are held by men. And I look around this room and we've got maybe 2 guys brave enough to attend the rest of women. And so it's about getting those males in the senior leadership roles to work flexibly, to work part-time. in my past company, we had one male out of 10,000 employees that was permanent part-time, and he was 65, which is a great way to retirement. But in Lion, do you have those high senior leaders walking the walk and actually leading the change? Because I think it's leadership is what it is about.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is another really great story. So when I first started my old role, the Strategy and Insights Director role, and we're owned by Kieran, I was going over to Kieran for an update on a piece of my work, and at the same time their CFO said, really interested in understanding flexible work at Lion, could you and my boss, the CFO, do a presentation to us on that? So it was a pretty open brief. I thought, wow, how am I going to do this? And then I thought about Kieran and very traditional in terms of culturally, in terms of some of the cultural ways of working, they're quite different to here.
It's Japanese, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I got my iPhone out, grabbed time with our CEO, our managing director of our beer business here in Australia, our managing director of our dairy and drinks business in Melbourne, coincided when they were all together in the one spot, asked them a few key questions. And I was blown away by their answers. So questions like, what do you value about flexible working? What do you see work well? And they were coming out of, and it wasn't scripted, because they started, what do you want me to say? I went, whatever you think. I just want honest answers. So our CEO was saying things like, I want a world where we've got 40, 40, 20. So that across our senior leader, or all of our roles, we've got 40% women, 40% male, and 20% either or, because, so you want the best person for the job, but this is what I see work well. And it ties into diversity of thought. It ties into to a whole host of other really great outcomes for the business. And these key themes are echoed through each managing director. Now, interestingly enough, they were all thinking really similar things, and they're all great things to hear, and I'm on the other end going, oh my God. and it's really impactful, but as an organisation, we hadn't even celebrated that and recognised that. So, and our managing directors too, who I interviewed, they were like, the women in my team who are working mums, they are amazing. They get so much stuff done because they have to structure their day, they have to plan their week. They just zoom through it all. I am constantly amazed at what these people get done, and they're awesome. So I'm paraphrasing a bit, but that was the theme and the context that came through. So there's a learning there, or an insight. Maybe it's about having a conversation with your senior leaders around what they think and don't think, because you may be right, or you may be pleasantly surprised around their position on diversity, supporting flexible working.
Do you have any senior leader roles held by men that are part-time?
Not part-time, but I would say, now this is what I observe, I think a lot of our senior leaders, whether they're male or female, work flexibly.
Yeah.
In that they're not in the office between 9 to 5.
And I do think flexibility and part-time are different.
Part-time's a form of flexibility, I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, I know, but I'm not seeing senior roles being held part-time.
Yeah.
Not by men. I've seen GMs or director and above levels job share, but women.
Yeah, and I think it potentially at your very senior level, that might not be what's important to that person at that part. So flexibility might be important, but part-time isn't. So if
I'm using that example for leadership. Once the top guys start doing it, the rest will follow.
Yeah. I mean, we're lucky in Lion, we've had leadership support of people doing roles part-time without necessarily our leaders themselves working part-time. And I would say, if I was to look at our group leadership team, they go, actually working part-time isn't what's important to me. So it's got to come down to the individual and what's important to them, but they passionately support flexible work, which includes part-time.
Any other questions? Vanessa?
Yeah, hi, thanks Emma. It's Vanessa James from TNT Australia. So I guess my background is similar to yours, manufacturing and industrial. My question is more about how much is flexibility being driven down the different levels of your organisation, white collar and blue collar. Do you offer it to blue collar as well?
There was and I haven't worked in the supply chain space for a little while, so I can't give you a definitive answer. What I do know is that about a year ago, so we've got a great people and culture team, and we've got people in that team who are just focused on flexibility and diversity and inclusion, which is wonderful to have that investment in those resources in your organisation as well. But I know there was a dedicated, very small group of people looking at how you could introduce flexibility in your more operational area where you're working to shift patterns, and obviously there's a safety issue if you don't have a certain number of people on for certain activities. So that's where it does get a bit tricky, because if just from a safety point of view, at times you need to have a minimum number of people operating a certain process to make that work safely for everyone. I don't know where it landed, but I know the business was looking and trialling different ways of working in that space.
And I think the interesting part about that question is that, you know, a lot of organisations are on the journey, and the fact that there's a question being asked and there's a conversation being had about it. You know, some forms of flexibility are probably impractical, and we all have to acknowledge that. And there's also phases of, I imagine many businesses are going through this where things need to get done, and if there's tight deadlines, if a culture and an environment is not used to that flexibility, it can be hard to deliver.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. You do need leadership support, and it needs to be, the support needs to be there, and it needs to be verbalised and championed. And it can be where you do have people working part-time or working flexibly, really celebrated. And I know for me, there have been times when I've left early to pick up kids and I feel like I've almost got to walk out of the office with my head down. But I've really flipped that around over the years to, you know, almost walk out with what a feeling playing in my head, and and really celebrating that.
Yeah. Can I ask just a question to the audience? Who's in an environment that believes they celebrate flexibility in a culture that does that? For everyone online there, that was about 50% of the room. So there's clearly a divide, and different organisations doing different things, which is why I think this topic's so important for us to discuss. Are there any other questions here? Regan, and I'll just go Sue next.
I have a couple of questions. Sue Rosen, sorry. One of which is back actually really to Michelle's question about part-time versus flexibility. You often, when I hear objections to part-time work, it's around client-facing types of roles. And examples of people I worked with have been in creative agencies or in investment banking, and saying, I have to be accessible, you know, I have to be accessible to the team all the time, I have to be accessible to the clients all the time. What would you know, what's your take on that? Because I know a number of women who have tried to work those roles, kind of 4-day-a-week roles, and have ultimately gone back to full-time because it wasn't working. And I, like you, I absolutely have the view, everything can be done part-time and flexibly, but sometimes that flexibility ends up with you having no boundaries around your personal life.
Yeah.
Because we have to be accessible all the time, and technology, while a great enabler, can also be a terrible weight around, around us.
I think it's thinking through different ways where you can get the same outcome without going into how we've operated. So I come back to the example of my planning manager having a planning manager who isn't available during month end was a kind of a new concept. But what she did, we got a great 2IC on board. We knew that all queries could go to her 2IC, and that and then that 2IC knew if she couldn't answer it or she needed direction, she would then only go to her leader or my planning manager as needs be. So there is still that element of flex at key points, but it's only where it absolutely has to happen for an obvious reason or for a key reason. So I think it's about thinking about how do you use your broader team to address those client needs or the business needs, but it's making sure that you've got someone with the right capability, who's had the right coaching, and then there's almost a way of working between those two people to go, look, if it's queries of this nature, just run with it. You don't need my approval. This is your gig. Run it on these days. But if you're kind of getting into this area or this territory, let me know. So that's something I've seen that's worked. Sales is a bit harder, but again, I think there is a little bit about setting expectations. Sometimes it's about working across your team too. Can you take a whole of team approach? And so on this day, can someone else pick it up?
Yeah, I think the interesting part, and I might interject, because I have been fundamentally in sales my entire career, and I've worked with some fantastic people that have worked on a part-time basis, and I believe there's many ways to cut that solution, and I think, for our audience, most people either be working with salespeople to some degree and influencing them, or might not be. But the ultimate piece, and it goes back to exactly what I think we just talked about, is designing it appropriately and performance and capability. So if there's an individual that's performing and able to deliver, then that, there might be an increase on the cost base because you're giving them some more support, but you measure that into their output and you go, well, how do I design it so that we're still actually in the same position at the end? And it goes exactly the same way for any of your own roles. Is the same position going to occur at the end no matter how we get there? And if you can, I think any logical person, if they hear a solution like that and it can be executed and there's a feasible way of doing it, I think you can do it anywhere. And I've seen it in sales functions, so I think it's pretty fair to aid that. Although there's pressures and environments and cultures of people around you that actually make that harder to achieve if they don't believe in it, and that's probably more the issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Regan, you had a question?
Yeah, so my name is Regan from CSC. My question is mostly around, you achieved a good career trajectory, like the growth has been consistent, it's been coming, and being flexible and being taken seriously, it's a hard struggle for most people, I think. In our organization, my very good colleague was basically went from full-time to part-time because she had kids, and the office politics was just too much to handle for her, and we adopted all those techniques, like I was the 2IC on the days when she was not there, and all those things, but it just still didn't work for her, and eventually she's just caved in and decided to quit. So that being taken seriously for the future roles plus maintaining that office politics it's really a hard thing. And what would you suggest for someone in that situation again in the future?
Well, it doesn't sound like a culture I'd enjoy working in, what you're describing.
It's
so,
but
yeah.
we celebrate flexibility. Like for me, I can work 3 or 4 days work from home if I need to, and be there for my family. Like I work from Sundays. There were been days since I started working at 9 p.m., finished at 5, then slept through till 10 o'clock in the morning, and then got back again and got online again. So we celebrate flexibility. It's just that this particular instance is just got too toxic, to be honest.
So obviously I don't know the details, but my initial thinking is it's probably not about working part-time. It's probably about something more broader culturally going on in the organisation, and I would suggest that whether someone's working part-time or full-time in that environment, it's probably still not going to be that a nicer place to work. So I don't know if there's an obvious answer there, because getting culture right is hard, and it takes investment and passion and support by your senior leadership team. So it means that if a culture is toxic or not working, it kind of needs to be called and owned by the senior leaders in that business.
What about being taken seriously about future opportunities when you're in a part-time or flexible arrangement?
Yeah, it's hard because I don't know why you wouldn't be. Because I come back to, again, if you're aligned and you've open and honestly aligned on what you're working on, what the priorities are and you're achieving what you've committed, why I don't understand why you wouldn't be taken seriously.
It sounds like confusion between performance and flexibility and credibility, the balance there. They're good. They're some very good questions. We've got only a couple more minutes, and I just want to throw a quick last question, or a couple of last questions. One is quick ones. Time-saving hacks, right? So obviously you're busy, you've got a lot going on. What are some hacks that people could take away that you apply?
What do I do? So for what works for me, I use Sunday night to plan my week ahead. So again, once the kids are in bed, I get my week ahead hat on, and I start to think, all right, okay, what are the key? So I'm clear in myself. These are the things I need to achieve this week if I'm going to keep on track with my overarching plan. What do I need to do to make that happen? Have I structured my week well? So I think it's that planning ahead, and having that time for planning is, and sometimes it can feel hard to take time out to plan when you've got a lot on, but it actually helps you focus on what you need to focus. About 2 years ago, I discovered the bullet point journal technique, which I love, and I use that. I know a lot of people use electronics. I love electronics, but I think still a bit old-fashioned when it comes to using my little bullet point journal. I think I'm really clear on activities. This is more in my personal or home life that aren't important to me, and so I've started using Airtasker a bit over the last few months and having a lot of fun there. And again, it's just really simple stuff that helps me get stuff done. So gardening, I actually really enjoy gardening. I love gardening, but it's the choice of, well, actually, do I want to go out for lunch with friends and family, or do I want to? So it's making choices. So it's being really clear on, actually, this is what's important to me, and this is what I'm going to compromise. So it's there's a little bit of being realistic on what you can and can't do, and sometimes you don't do things that you actually really enjoy doing, but it's because something's more important.
So you prioritise. I'll give you everyone one of my little hacks. I didn't like mowing the lawn, so I got fake grass. And it was not that I didn't like it, I actually needed more time, and there you go.
Yeah.
Big investment for it. I paid for that time. So look, we are starting to get to the end of the hour, and I think there probably will be some extra questions. So if anyone online that wants to email me through any questions or put them through online, please pass them through, and I'll talk to Emma, and I'm sure we'll get them answered. If you want to hang around for a little